Through the phone, my mother yelled out, "Emily, how could you do this to us?" Her voice quivered with a mix of anger, shock, and a hint of terror. "We're stranded. Do you have any idea what you've done to this family?" As if it had betrayed me, I stared at the phone while holding it away from my ear. She sounded frantic and harsh like a razor, attempting to slash through my determination. I could still hear her voice leaking out of the speaker. Still, though, something settled inside me. In no way arrogant, feeling down. I mean, come on, calm. I didn't break this family. That was someone else. They were the ones. At the same time, they made the decision that my sacrifice was voluntary. It was as if my allegiance had no value, that their golden kid was more valuable than me. A couple of years of putting money aside, making plans and fantasizing. For 2 long years, I kept seeing their expressions. As we strolled through Savannah as a family, laughing and enjoying ourselves, they ruined it all with a single last-minute decision to not include my younger sister on the trip I planned and paid for. As a result, I exerted my every remaining strength. I put an end to all of that. Regardless of the hotel tour or booking, gone. They may go ahead and cut me out, even without my money. Now they were in a state of panic, standing bewildered in a hotel lobby without any bookings, and trying to figure out how everything went wrong. However, I was not perplexed. When I finally understood that I had never been a genuine member of the we they always spoke about, I knew it was the breaking point. According to their account, I went from being the family fixer to the villain in this tale. Responsible people have always been me. One who gets up early, creating spreadsheets. I may not have wanted it, but my family was the glue that kept everything from falling apart. I am Emily Dawson, and I reside in a peaceful area on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon. There are more trees than people, and the nighttime quiet may lift your spirits or bring you to your knees depending on how much you're struggling. My full-time job is as a data analyst for a private logistics firm, and I'm 29 years old and unmarried by choice. The term stoic but sweet describes me to my coworkers, and my therapist has complimented my ability to control my emotions. Maybe I'm simply exhausted, feeling weary of constantly being the one to smooth up imperfections. My loved ones, they're not bad. None of them are monstrous, but they've always been good at evoking a reaction from me. Small, unbeknownst to you, that is. Disregard any form of abusive language. It's not quite that loud, subtler, even more toxic. Standing tall, haughty, and completely preoccupied with outward looks, my mom Barbara exemplifies the archetypal Southern matriarch. In her view, empathy is admirable as long as it remains civil. She expects nothing less than the coldest embraces. Frank, my dad, is more reserved. The type of guy who, when things become heated, swallows his words and hides behind his coffee cup. Claire is the next one. At 24 years old, my little sister Claire Dawson embodies all that I am not. Strongly opinionated, flashy, notoriously popular on Instagram. As an incentive to smile for the camera, she undertakes online fashion hauls and receives free stuff. The discontinuation of her beloved latte once brought her to tears. It was on the very same day that I learned of my promotion denial. Who do you think our parents felt sorry for more? Regardless, I adore them, or, in my mind, I did. That is why I planned a surprise for them for a whole 2 years, 24 months, of very limited funds, postponed brunches, thrifted jackets, and freelancing side gigs. Going on a trip to celebrate our parents' 30th anniversary. Onwards to Savannah, GA, Mom had planned to go to Savannah for her honeymoon but couldn't afford it, so I decided to go there instead. She embodied the essence of the South in its romanticism and charm. She had noted a historic hotel in a travel magazine, so I made the reservation. Because my dad was so interested in history, I planned every element of our trip. This included carriage rides, riverside meals, and even a ghost walk. The intended effect was mystical. Yes, I did secretly wish I could have been a part of that enchantment. For once, I wished they could see more than just the reliable daughter, the backup plan, and the family fixer when they looked at me. I desired to be a part of it all, incorporated, unnecessary. However, within, I was aware. I had a feeling. In our family, there has always been an unspoken rule: Claire is number one. I took cover for her whenever she was in difficulty. I made sure to remind her of her birthdays whenever she seemed to forget. I took money out of my savings to help my parents avoid getting a loan after she wrecked their car. They expressed their gratitude toward me. When spoken as an afterthought, however, as, "Your sister just needs a little help right now," the expression takes on a different tone. Still, though, this journey seemed like it would be different. I put my all into this, my funds. Here is my strategy. I was hoping that would be the turning point that would alter the course of events. Caveat emptor, it was wrong. On the morning of our journey, I rose earlier than usual. For some reason, I just couldn't get to sleep. Not when I have everything ready to go. The bargain-priced navy blue luggage, the meticulously folded itinerary, and the matching travel wallets I had engraved with our initials. Dr. B.D. under the name of Barbara Dawson. It was F.D. by way of Frank Dawson. James E.D. in my case, Emily Dawson. At 6 o'clock in the morning, we were to go out. I didn't want to risk missing my trip to Atlanta because of how tight the connection was. At 5:55 in the morning, with the engine running and the heating turned down low, I was outside my parents' house, listening to a podcast that I was unable to concentrate on. The front door swung open at precisely 6 minutes and 2 seconds, and my mom rolled her bag out the door. The same travel cardigan she always wears, and that awful staged smile she saves for selfies and family reunions were both on display. "You're late," she said softly, her tone devoid of fun. I was being serious. "I don't think so." The dashboard caught my eye. 6:02, and more minute than expected. As I stepped out to collect her bags, I greeted her with a kind smile and a stiff lip. Upon spotting her, I was already on my way to the trunk. "Claire, please," coming out of the front door with her own baggage trailing after her, as if it were second nature. My footfall came to a halt. Frozen was my smile. Pause a second. I don't understand. "What's going on?" I inquired, my voice strained to be heard over the crunch of dirt beneath Claire's roller wheels. The airy, dismissive tone that my mom used to say, "OM," was all too familiar to me. "Last night we discussed it. Instead, Claire will be there." I gasped for air. Right now she spoke the words, "instead of you," as if she were updating the weather forecast. Recently, Claire has been under a lot of stress. This vacation is necessary for her. She spoke about it as if it were true, such that it wasn't inhumane, as if everything clicked into place. I moaned. I blinked as if trying to change the words by clearing my eyes. "Mom, I've been plotting this out for a long time. I covered all the costs, those excursions, those hotels, those..." Swaying her hand, she signaled. "Also, my darling, we are really appreciative. I kid you not. You never stop working, though. Another excursion might be organized at a later time. Right now, Claire needs this. I felt a rapid increasing drumming in my ears, and my heart began to pound. Claire even managed to keep her composure. She appeared arrogant, if anything. She would wear the same sly grin whenever she managed to get away with something. "Thanks for understanding, sis," she replied, shifting her weight to one hip as if I were the saint and she the sufferer. She remained completely silent. As they turned around, they heard the front door squeak open again. With a travel cushion and his phone charger in tow, my dad strolled out, wiping his eyes. He remained silent, avoided looking at me. As if nothing had happened, he just gave me his bag and headed for the car, as if this were par for the course. A growing heat behind my eyelids was something I could sense. The weight of all the times I'd repressed my feelings rather than express them verbally. Our trip was supposed to be this, I said, my voice quivering. This is something I would want to tell you. Just for us, I meticulously arranged every detail, every meal, every walking tour. Well, it still is, my mom answered with a smile on her face. But this time it's with Claire. Emily, this is not a major issue. It was audible to me even while she remained silent. Keep the atmosphere intact. Keep it simple. Save us from shame. My mouth was on the verge of exploding with words as I clamped down my jaw. Anger, hurt, despicable behavior. Every one of them was literally on the verge of slipping my tongue. However, I gulped them down and nodded rigidly in agreement. I muttered, "Let's go," in a harsh tone as I opened the trunk. "I hope you don't lose your flight." I went from being a passenger on the trip to its chauffeur in an instant. There was stifling traffic on the way to the airport. In response to the eerie quiet, Claire began to babble nonstop about fashion TikToks and whether or not they would have time to buy in Savannah. My mom made light-hearted jokes with her as my dad sat silently by the window as if he weren't sitting in the rubble of my hopes and dreams. "Emily, I appreciate you driving us," my dad finally remarked, after clearing his throat again. What a burden this must feel, out of common. In the mirror behind us, we locked eyes. I find it peculiar. Dad, that's a fascinating way of putting things. His gaze averted once again. From the rear seat, Claire leaned forward. "Are you not upset with me? To put it simply, this is monumental for me. I would never have been able to pay for this by myself." I remained silent, continued driving after simply nodding. My knuckles got white from gripping the driving wheel so hard. I stepped out to assist with unloading their bags as soon as we reached the drop-off zone and patiently waited for someone to speak. Anything at all. However, nothing changed. Saying, "Thank you for understanding, sweetheart." Mom embraced me briefly as if it were a medal. Claire tossed in an extra "You're the best" before hurriedly pulling her bag to the door. They vanished without a trace. I watched them go into the terminal from my solitary spot on the curb. Some tightness had developed in my chest. The tightening of my jaw caused pain. I wanted to scream so much that my eyes hurt from suppressing my emotions. It was quiet as I drove home. Discontinuation of podcast, playing silently. There was nothing except the raspy, weak sound of my own breathing. As I finally understood something I ought to have known a long time ago. In spite of my best efforts, my meticulous planning, and the number of pieces I managed to keep together, there was no way I would be the first, no, according to them, at no point in time. And I wasn't only wounded, it was a new sensation altogether. A strong enough sense of anger prompted me to take action. I arrived home to find that the numbness had begun to dissipate, replaced with a chillier sensation. Rage number hoopla is audible. It was less noisy here. The load is heavier, chock-fuller. Like damp cement, it slid into my chest. I sat for a while behind the wheel, gazing at the garage door front of me. I had planned obsessed and spent every last dime on this vacation, and now it was finally happening. Unless I'm involved, of course, I was getting ready to weep. Rather, I took a single deep breath in, and then exhaled slowly and trembling. Afterwards, I went to grab my laptop bag. On the inside in the front pocket was the black folder I had marked as the Dawson Anniversary Project. Within were printed itineraries, confirmation numbers, hotel contact sheets, upgraded boarding tickets, each and every aspect of the journey I had planned like a design for the ideal recollection. You name it, it is mine. I don't own this, certainly not theirs. It is mine. I cautiously made my way to my kitchen, exuding an air of menace. Quite calm and collected. I mean, come on, anatomically exact. After placing my laptop on the counter, I lifted the lid and patiently waited for it to load up. Amidst the tranquility of my abode, the gentle hum of the fan's activation seemed like a battle drum. Press the button, sign in, retrieve the spreadsheet. Yes, I saw it. Plan after plan painstakingly drawn up with my fingerprints all over it. Situated in the middle of downtown Savannah, the Hotel Montgomery is a historic boutique inn. The King Heritage Suite is reserved for 3 nights and cannot be refunded until canceled within 24 hours of the scheduled arrival, on time every time. After going to the hotel's website, I entered my login information and selected the Cancel Reservation button. It brought up a dialog box. Would you like to proceed with canceling your reservation? My finger quivered ever so slightly as I lingered over the word yes for an instant. Then it happened. The display was updated. A few seconds after that, I received a cancellation email. It was awkward, and I kept my mouth stiff. I choose not to weep. I have progressed to the next assignment. Private evening walking tours in Savannah, put on hold. Seating reservations for the Southern Belle riverboat dinner cruise, put on hold. Enjoy an anniversary discount on a historic carriage ride, put on hold. Airplane lounge access. Paid back insurance for your trip removed because, well, they didn't voluntarily opt in. Slowly but surely, I took the journey that had taken me 2 years to plan apart. A scalpel came with every click. A silent cut for every cancellation. No ill will intended. In no uncertain terms, for the sake of staying alive. The decision was taken that very morning. Even I did it. Were they expecting Claire to arrive first? Very well. Submit the itinerary to her. Permit her to clarify at check-in why the room she is attempting to assert as non-existent. Remind her that a Christmas dinner reservation isn't going to magically appear just because an influencer grins or posts a cropped selfie. Show her what it's like when you don't pick up after you. My inbox was flooded with confirmation emails and reimbursement messages by the time I shut my laptop. Parts of the journey were still floating around the internet like ash. Plus, I experienced a weightlessness I hadn't felt since dawn. Decent but not great. Still not well, however, with less weight. As the sky went from a delicate blue to a bruised, gloomy gray, I made a pot of tea and sat by the window to watch. I held the cup in my hands. I knew the storm hadn't even started yet, even though it was still early. Nothing has been spoken as of yet. They would, though. They succeeded. Just before their Atlanta stopover, there was the first rumble. Emily, the hotel confirmation is incorrect. Mom's voice hissed through the phone. Give me a ring immediately. A follow-up emailed 5 minutes afterwards. There doesn't appear to be a reservation for the carriage excursion. Have you forgotten to finalize it, Emily? The escalation followed. Emma's voice, sharp, feeling entitled, very low volume. Emily, this is so trivial. Your actions are detracting from our vacation. Yeah, I get that you're furious, but this is extreme. It needs fixing right now. She remained silent. It was an ultimatum from her. Another ding. It was my phone. Once again. Plenty of writings, communications via voicemail, lost phone calls. Would you be so kind as to check on the bookings? My dad said his message excruciatingly boring. This doesn't add up. Shut off, I almost found it funny, I muttered out loud. My phone was switched off, without a doubt. Total absence of sound. No beeping, nobody has called. I am not guilty. As I sipped my tea on the couch, I found myself staring at the walls. And guess what? I experienced a sense of good. For years, it had been like drowning. Now I could breathe. I had always played the role of the responsible, reserved daughter, the one who sat up late contacting locations and figuring out expenses to make sure everything appeared to be taken care of, so that they could just arrive and have fun. Finally, they snatched it all. Then Claire was presented with it. They expected me to do nothing and just let it happen. Be positive despite the treachery. After dropping them off at the airport, I'll go home and wait for the pictures in which I won't appear. They had no idea who I was. I don't think so. Why? Because Emily from before could have sobbed. Perhaps the previous Emily would have dismissed it as just another setback in a long history of marginalization. However, this new me, they were unaware of this version's knowledge. When you devote your entire life to helping others who never return, the favor eventually, you will tire of it. When that day finally arrives, it won't be a rumble. It isn't aggressive. Anger is not the motive. All is calm, on purpose, final. Because of such, it leaves a lasting impression. Even before their plane landed in Savannah, the calls started. Just going with my gut, I disregarded them at first. Just as I was getting comfortable in my chair and enjoying the tea that I had missed earlier, my phone started flashing on the kitchen counter. First once, then twice, and finally 6 times in less than a minute. It sounded demon-possessed as it buzzed on the granite. I choose not to examine it, not initially. However, curiosity triumphed with the third voicemail. As soon as I walked over, I grabbed it and hit play. The room was filled with my mother's voice, anxious, raspy, and on the brink of hysteria. Hey, Emily, what's happening? Our reservation has been canceled according to the hotel. You sent me an email with a confirmation number last month. I provided it, but they claimed the order had been canceled. No longer scheduled. With our baggage in tow, we find ourselves in an impasse. I need a return call right away. With a beep, the message came to an end. A motionless figure stood there. After that, one from Claire followed. This isn't amusing, Em. Looking foolish out here. Are you serious? Our hotel reservation was canceled. You lack maturity. Make this right this second. The word "our" reappeared, like it had never really been mine to begin with. A second, shorter and more uncomfortable message came in. This one was from Dad. Listen, I'm sure this is all a mistake, Em. Are you able to check it out from your end? Basically, we're at a loss at the moment. An omission. It seemed as if everything had fallen into place by chance. My phone was turned off once again when I pushed the power button. No justifications. I am not sorry. No further explanations. Embrace the unknown for a change. The first luggage I had packed for Savannah had been unloaded by the time nightfall came. I put away the outfits I had picked out for meals that would never come, took out the travel-sized toiletry bag, and put my walking shoes back in the closet. All of my preparations were finally placed to rest. In a manner that hurt like hell, it was almost poetic. I poured myself a glass of wine and plugged in the phone later that night. Not to answer, but to watch. A Christmas tree glow emitted from the screen. 22 calls that were not returned, with 9 voicemails, roughly 40 texts. As if I were an archaeologist removing layers of guilt, I sat at the kitchen table and scrolled carefully. "This has gone too far, Emily. I don't know what you think you're proving." The hotel lobby is filled with Claire's sobs. "Was it your goal? I feel humiliated. We expect more from the child we nurtured you. You're behaving in an immature manner. Oh, I beg you, just repair it. No need for an argument with me. If you're angry with your father, don't punish him. You have disgraced us. You're the one who should be ashamed. At last, it is imperative that we have this conversation. My dad says this isn't right." I remained silent. I just typed a response and then erased it. I choose to remove the voicemails instead. No ill will intended. With regard to my dignity, I had been the go-between for all of them for a long time. I had been the peacemaker, the mediator, and the fixer. They were writhing in pain now that I had removed myself, because they had nowhere to settle when their dysfunction was absent of me. The storm continued to roar the following afternoon. The familiar piercing and violent ringtone of my mother resounded throughout the home as I emptied the fridge. I decided to pick up this time. An explosion was heard as the wire was connected. "Hello, Emily. Tell me what you did." The second hotel also denied our reservation when we attempted to check in. "Has it been canceled as well?" "No, I didn't." "I think so. I put an end to it all." Total absence of sound. Very soon. It was hardly long enough to feel the jolt. "I don't understand why you would do that." "Hearsing," she said. I drew a deep breath in. "Why? Because you chose not to include me in the journey. I opted out of paying for the trip." "You're exaggerating. Claire was more in need of this than you were." The hierarchical structure was once again exposed. In some sense, Claire's needs were always more pressing, more pronounced, top priority. As a result, perhaps Claire should have organized it herself. "You would have understood," we thought. "You were mistaken," I stated plainly. I ended the call before she could scatter accusations like frisbees. Claire phoned 10 minutes after that. I debated not answering at all, but then I remembered that I had to hear her out. She sounded haughty, arrogant, and on the verge of shouting. "Emily, you're belittling. No joke. For once you couldn't manage to be in the spotlight, man up." Here was my opportunity to step outside my thoughts and take a deep breath. "Have you any idea how many people rely on me while we're online?" I suppressed a chuckle. Adherence in cyberspace, sure thing. For my parents, I organized the vacation. You took control of it. My mom extended an invitation to me. At first, I was completely against going. However, you left, even if you knew it wasn't destined for you, realizing the amount of effort I had put into it. My goodness, you put on this whole martyr act. You're simply resentful. "No," I responded, not resentful, just done. In the midst of my tirade, I hung up and turned off my phone. An end to the justifications. No more opportunities to cast me as the antagonist in a plot they altered without my knowledge or permission. My sleep that night was the most restful I'd had in months. No phone on the nightstand. I am not being pursued by anxious thoughts. Nothing except silence. The sudden insight you get when you quit trying to make other people get you is bizarre. That is unnecessary. The fact that you aren't acting out the part they gave you is all they need to handle. There was no longer any tranquility in the air on the third day. It crumbled easily, tense, similarly to the moment just before a violin string breaks. For about 36 hours, my phone had been turned off. During that period, I experienced a level of serenity that I hadn't felt since my infancy, a place where no one imposed any expectations on me to be tidy, present, or silent. But the silence would eventually break, nor did it. I restarted my phone at 10:17 in the morning. It seemed like the entire universe swung back. In a few seconds later, all humming and quivering and pulsating with missed connections. 18 messages left on voicemail, with more than 40 texts still untouched. Some of them remained unopened. I chose not to. They proceeded in accordance with a routine. Give us a call right now. This is getting out of hand. Even now, Claire is crying. She is exhausted. Your dad is absolutely irate. What the fuck just happened to you? What really stood out to me, though, was the most recent message, a phone call from Dad, not Claire or Mom. It rang once more, it went to my voicemail, and once more. My response came on the third attempt. Emily, he began as if he were someone who had entered a room on fire and was hoping that by acting normally, the blaze would go out. This is getting out of hand, you know. Claire and your mom they're worn out. Basically, they're stuck. I remained silent. You've successfully conveyed your argument, he kindly added. Then what? Then let's just repair it. It needs fixing. Those are the two words that not long ago represented who I was. Emily plays the unstated role of family fixer. However, this is no longer true. I drew a deep breath in. You expect me to make up for the trip you expelled me from. With a moment he spoke. It was never intended that way. Is it really? I exclaimed. Reason being, it appears to be very apparent from my vantage point. The vacation was my idea. The trip was covered by me. The journey was in my dreams. And yet you all came to the conclusion that I had no business being there. That's not true, he remarked, speaking a bit too hastily. We simply believed. You just felt that Claire had a greater need for it, I interjected. Is that so? That her worries, tensions, number of followers, and overwhelming life were more important than the work I did? That the value of her relief exceeded my gift? A heavy sigh escaped him. I hope your mom meant well, I remarked angrily. She always means well. Nevertheless, your decision to allow me to drive you to the airport, while Claire essentially occupied my seat, remains unaddressed regardless of your intentions. His voice drooped as he spoke to Emily. It's not good enough for you. I went completely still. Such words, that voice. You've consistently exhibited a sense of reasonableness, he extended. Every member of this family relies on you. Make sure that one poor decision doesn't ruin everything. The temperature behind my eyelids started to climb. Out of wrath, not melancholy. That's the issue, Dad, I said. You expected me to maintain harmony even when I was the object of your wrath. He remained silent. In a low voice, I muttered, I've been the bandage for years. You guys sliced and I taped it up. After Claire made a mistake, I corrected it. Even though Mom paid me no mind, I forced a grin. What comes next? Who am I to be blamed now that I've managed to distance myself? His silence persisted. Saying, You didn't think I'd stand up for myself, I continued. Once again, you expected me to simply give up. If you gave me crumbs, I would taste the pain and be grateful. Wow, I've had enough of being thankful for just being tolerated. I maintained my composure. It was stable for the very first time. Managed effectively, unnerving in its serenity. It was my decision to cancel the vacation. I decided to take the benefits with me, since you rendered me expendable. A lengthy silence followed. But you're punishing the whole family, he added this time with more subdued tone. That made me giggle, quite sharp, very low. This family has always made room for me, so that's a good sign. His chest tightened. It was as if a stone were dropping into his throat as he realized it. I apologize if that is how you feel. Yes, I saw it. No apologies here. That time-honored Dawson offense. I am not in need of your remorse, I declared. Please acknowledge me. Every time you've asked me to give something up so that other people may feel comfortable, I wish someone would eventually notice. Then what he inquired. So you're essentially ignoring us. I established a barrier, I said again. You can't reap the rewards of my work until you include me in it. Well, that certainly isn't love. It's a charming form of exploitation. Even more so, his voice dipped. Emily, could you? I was finished already, though. I need space, I stated plainly. Maybe I should just learn to live with the fact that if that makes me selfish in your eyes. I hung up the phone. I remained still in the kitchen for a few moments with one hand resting on the counter and the other dangling by my side. Not out of shame, but relief, my entire body quivered. I choose not to weep. I stayed together. I did nothing more than stand there taking deep breaths in the personal space. I had created a place I had never previously been granted. There was no tranquility. It was sincere, though. I came to a realization in this updated kind of honesty. Loving someone doesn't give you permission to let them hurt you anymore. I had a feeling they were returning today. I thought this vacation would be a present when I booked the initial return flight, and the same day I got the confirmation email from the airline. Those were the days when I had the firm belief that I was an integral element of my family's equation, rather than an expendable variable. At 4:20 p.m., their jet was supposed to touch down. That allowed me to get a coffee on the way to my parents' house, where I would be present not to meet them, but to be there when they arrived. To meet their gaze, so they might observe the aftermath of the family fixer's decision to quit mending. I positioned myself on the border of their gravel driveway, maintaining an appropriate distance from the house to provide clear visibility of the road while simultaneously drawing their attention to ensure they couldn't help but see me. While waiting, I sat on the porch swing with a paper cup of dark roast in my hands. A yellow taxi arrived shortly after, looking as weary and tardy as the passengers it was transporting. Out of everyone, my mom came out first. Her normally coiffed locks cascaded down her shoulders. A reddish tint has replaced her once vivid tan. There was a tightness in her face. Following that, Claire arrived toting a beaten luggage that appeared to have been defeated by the baggage carousel. From my seat, I could see the strain on her jawline despite her large sunglasses. After Dad, who slammed the trunk with excessive force, arrived, there was a brief hush. Reversing along the dirt road, the only sounds were the faint murmur of cicadas and the gentle wheeze of the taxi's engine. After much stillness, Claire finally said, "I hope you're pleased nonetheless. A little sip of coffee was mine. So what makes you happy?" With rigid motions, my mom snapped, "The trip was a disaster." She then marched stiffly toward the porch, The hotels we stayed at were all either completely full or extremely dirty. I hated the meal. The tours, oh no, that's wrong. Emily, you have made your case. I crouched down. Have I? Assembling her sunglasses, Claire placed them in her purse. You made it happen. Booking anything excellent at the last minute was out of our price range, as you well understood. It was intriguing, I remarked. Why? Because I can still vividly recall proposing you a well-organized, fully funded holiday. One that you were not invited to. The intensity in my mother's voice increased. That's harsh of you. Murmured softly, I voiced my refusal. As I stood in your driveway, Cruel overheard you inform me that Claire would be arriving instead. The 2 years I spent planning this trip were for nothing when I saw you give it to her. Behind them, my dad shuffled uneasily, his hands in his pockets, as if he wanted to burrow inside and vanish. You weren't obligated to cancel anything, he said, avoiding eye contact with me. Gradually, I got to my feet and placed my mug of coffee on the porch rail. Why would I pay for a vacation on which I was not even invited? If Claire really needed it, she could have arranged for it herself. I paid for it, scheduled it. Meanwhile, she refrained from doing so. She casually took my seat as if it were hers by right of inheritance. Crossed arms, Claire stood. It appears like you're portraying this as a major act of betrayal. It felt like a getaway. No, I responded. I saw a trend. An ideal representation of all the times Claire has put her comfort before mine, whether by ignoring me, stepping on me, or sacrificing me. My mother frowned. No, that is incorrect. A strong "it is" came out of me. Each time I sat in the passenger seat. Be the bigger person was your constant request whenever Claire made a mistake. She always wanted me to clean up after her so she could avoid punishment. Claire advanced her voice, becoming more assertive. My, you're quite the show-off, Emily. You are not alone in your problems. Maybe not, I said, but no one else is supposed to take it. It's just me. Total absence of sound, deadly tangible stillness. I descended from the porch and stood a short distance ahead of them. Would you like Claire to leave? I inquired. Very well. It was your desire granted. Do not, however, come wailing to me when things do not go according to plan. The fruits of my effort will not be yours if you remove me from the picture. That was never our goal, Dad whispered. I pointed out that it was entirely up to you. My mother's lips were pursed as she crossed her arms. We assumed you'd be able to comprehend. A lot has been happening to Claire. I haven't, have I? I inquired. I was on call on weekends, holidays skipped, dedicated years of frugal living to provide a unique gift for this family. In your honor. On top of that, you took my seat the one time I requested inclusion. Angry Claire scowled. Your presence is no longer relevant. Control became your central theme. It was that. I ventured closer. Control number limits were at issue here. You forfeited any claim to my assets the moment you expelled me. My funds. I am free. My best. You're our daughter, my mom said with a stern tone. Noon does this to each other in their families. No, I responded. That kind of behavior is not typical among families. No one has the right to use the word family as a shield and whip it when they want to. My mother's lips parted, then shut. Just one side, no witty response. They were 3 weary souls who had found solace in my submission, and I stared at them all. They assumed I would always respond positively for a long time. Their defenses were buckling under the weight of my firm rejection. The journey has become irrelevant. It was never truly meant to be. Being the duct tape that kept a broken family facade together for years was the theme here. And lastly, avoiding sticking, I pivoted and made my way back to my vehicle. I said over my shoulder, "I'm relieved you made it home safely." Remember, though, that the past is not a guarantee of the future. I had never before left them standing there all by myself. They were bewildered, furious, and completely helpless. And I turned my back on them. The altercation in the driveway occurred 2 days ago. It had been 2 days since I'd seen the individuals who had previously provided me with a sense of security collapse under the burden of the words I'd harbored for so long. They hadn't gotten back to me after that. No irate messages left by Claire. "Mom won't make you feel guilty." Complete stillness. After that, my phone started ringing on a Sunday afternoon. Dear Father, I certainly didn't anticipate that it would be him. He kept to himself, the diplomat, the man who, like a bystander, delivering a garden water to a home on fire, has always been on the brink of family strife. I gave it a ring. To preserve the peace and quiet I had finally achieved, a part of me wished I could turn a blind eye to it. Accept was the word that came out of my mouth, though. It was an old, unresolved emotion. "Hey, he murmured. He spoke with a thicker, slower voice than normal. It was as if he had practiced many introductions and then discarded them all. A cool but not frigid hi was my response. A halt followed. As for me, allow me to inquire, afraid you wouldn't pick up the phone when your mom phoned, so look who it is. I exhaled slightly, sigh absent. Dissatisfaction is not the goal. Release it. Okay, I responded. I said, so talk? He quavered in his seat. Listen, this entire situation. Things have become unbearable. Someone is furious with your mom. The one that Claire got very angry. And I believe that at our core, we're all simply attempting to decipher its origin. Despite his inability to perceive my movement, I arched an eyebrow. How did this come to be? I echoed it in a quiet voice. His explanation was as follows. It's just, this isn't your usual style. Yes, I saw it. That word all over again. Your usual demeanor is absolutely absent here. The most pervasive form of gaslighting, encased in a compliment, the delusion that asserting my independence was inherently uncharacteristic. Deviant behavior was that act of self-preservation. I answered, no, Dad, raising my voice in a hostile manner. I am like it. I have always been this way. I've spent my whole life catering to your every need, so you're simply not accustomed to seeing it. And you... To which she said, no, let me finish, as she sat down on the bedside. You all adored the handy version of myself, the one in charge of everything, who stepped in to cover for Claire, who maintained composure as my mother modulated my emotions like a thermostat. That's unfair, he whispered softly. Bittersweet. I grinned. Not being a part of my own tale is unfair, actually. Having one's position filled, let go of. You want me to take care of the family without complaining, and then you accuse me of being selfish the moment I let go. Still no word. Afterwards, he said, I'm confused about your request. I'm not seeking an address, Father, I responded. An apology is not even on my radar. Please know that I will not return to the part you assigned me. The way things turned out, though, was not his intention, he revealed. We felt Claire needed some time away, and you thought I'd just get it, I said, finishing my thought. I feel like you thought I was empty-handed. Do not worry, no emotion, just endless tolerance. Isn't that the way it always works? I supply what Claire requires. He remained silent. That was all it took. The trip wasn't the only one, I said. On birthdays, you tend to completely disregard my presence in the room. During the holidays, Claire's drama consumed the whole show. Conversations in which she regarded her thoughts as gospel truth, and I was treated as background noise. A whispered, "I didn't realize," escaped his lips. My response was, "I know. It's all about that." A deep sigh escaped him. "I don't know what to do thereafter. Are we over now?" I drew in my eyelids. "No," I responded. "No one will be left out. However, my role as family fixer is over. I will no longer put myself in danger so that Claire can be comfortable. For peace that benefits no one but those in power, I will not pay." He acknowledged that she had always been the more courageous one. "And you were never informed about the cost of that strength," I remarked. "At last, you get it. I am not responsible if you decide not to recognize it." A lengthy pause followed. I took my time filling it out, and lastly he spoke these words, "Your mother misses you. It's likely that she longs for someone to handle the aftermath," I said. "Nah, being the fallout sponge isn't something I miss." His voice slightly quivered. "Is our options limited?" It occupied my thoughts for what seemed like an eternity, put an end to acting like this was just a single poor choice, that it was just an outward sign of a more systemic imbalance that has persisted for a long time must be acknowledged. What happens if we go ahead and do it? Eventually, we may be able to construct something brand new. But that won't happen until you all quit acting as if my silence is a debt to you. He remained silent. Nonetheless, he remained on the line. There was almost a minute of silence as we sat side by side. My next statement was, "I must depart." "All right," he murmured. "I appreciate your response. Farewell, Father." I hung up the phone. For some while, I just gazed at the screen. I am not sad, no rage. I mean, come on. Aware, a clear split was lacking. It was neither fruitful nor fulfilling. It felt authentic. Simply said, it was sufficient. The world went silent as soon as the phone stopped ringing, which was unusual. There will no longer be a warning light system for missed calls. Every vibration is no longer tinged with remorse. I no longer had to deal with the emotional distraction of having to put out someone else's fire while my own burnt silently. Complete stillness, something out of the ordinary occurred during that period of quiet. Lastly, I could make out what I was thinking. This version of myself is not molded by the demands of the past, certainly not the go-getter, the mediator, or the emotional messiah by default. Nobody else except me. That Monday, I did something other than force myself to my desk and log in early because I was obligated to. Instead of having the same old reheated slop for breakfast again, I cooked a hearty meal consisting of egg spread and fresh coffee. Claire made fun of my sweater, calling it her grandma core, while I sat on my back porch and watched the fog roll in from behind the trees. It had been months since I had sat down to a meal without thinking about all the things I needed to accomplish for other people. No longer was the stillness lonely. Everything about it was holy. Later that day, I finally pulled out the drawer containing all my unfinished projects' notebooks that I'd scribbled in here and there before putting them away, and books that I had promised myself I would read sometime. Then I felt a hush come over me. Roll the dice again. Unfortunately, this time it's just for you. My next step was to compile a list. Things to do not include this. Want items. It had been a long time since I had done that. Enroll in the photography course at the neighborhood center. Get some new furniture for the living room that represents me. Go hiking in the Columbia River Gorge by yourself. Consistently read at least one book every month. See the world on my own dime away from loved ones and acquaintances. I managed to get 2 things checked off at the day's conclusion. I started looking at new furniture in colors I liked, rather than the boring beige that my mom had insisted was tasteful, and I signed up for a photography class. I felt as if I had lost a voice, and then I found it again. It returned and continued without ceasing. I started redecorating my flat, shifting things for enjoyment rather than practicality. Not out of spite, but because I refused to let myself be defined by the faces of others. I removed the framed family portraits from the hallway. I swapped them out for photographs I had shot on my own, featuring places like parks and street corners, as well as other scenes from everyday life that I had previously ignored while attempting to control the mayhem of another. I felt more like myself again after giving myself some space. For reasons other than venting, I picked up journaling again. I won't belabor the point. Being alone, I talked about the foolishness of feeling guilty, the grace of making your own decisions, and the sadness of cutting ties with those who were a drain on your energy but didn't realize it. I sobbed on occasion, not out of melancholy but genuine relief. Just by letting go of things that weren't really mine, I felt a tremendous sense of relief. At some point along this entire process, my pride started to rise. Pride that is not blatant and flagrant. Confident, low-key pride, though the sort that doesn't care if somebody gives it to you or not. About 3 weeks following the confrontation on a Friday night, I strolled through the downtown farmers market, totally by myself. Absence of timetable, absolutely no pressure. As I ran my fingertips over the binding of a handcrafted leather diary, I paused at a table selling them. The server's face lit up with a smile as she said, "Are you a writer?" I was hesitant. After that, they gave a heads up. "I think so. I believe I am." To say that was a relief. Real. After waiting a week, I retrieved the spreadsheet that had been used to organize the anniversary getaway. Each tab is color-coded. An ideal schedule, the allocation of funds. Everything was preserved as if it were a relic from an earlier era. I choose not to weep. I left it in there. A digital period marks the conclusion of a lengthy biased statement, and I simply closed the file. Afterwards, I launched a fresh tab and entered where to go on a solo adventure. The purpose of the journey wouldn't be to repair, prove, or satisfy this time around. I would take it. Slowly but surely, I restored my identity, not as the dependent sister my parents had hoped for, but as an independent human being. One who has favorite things, regarding limits. The word no was no longer quavering in that voice. No major development occurred, no rousing cheers, simply forward movement. Lastly, may you find rest. Neither was inadequate. I nearly didn't open the first text that started it all. As I sipped my tea and perused solo travel blogs one Saturday morning, a name that hadn't crossed my mind in years suddenly appeared on my computer. Brief and unpretentious was the statement. "Good day, Jenna H. Hello there. I saw that you were mentioned in a comment thread on a previous photography group. I know this is a strange question, but have you left Portland? Kirsten Harper, friend from college, neighbor in the hallway. The one with whom I initially shared my feelings of familial invisibility. There was no major reason why we stopped communicating after graduation. It's just the way things work, they fade away when you least expect them to." Thumb twitching, I gazed at the message. Next I entered. "Stayed put. a touch more pessimistic, an increase of caffeine content. Who wants to play catch-up? 2 hours later, we found ourselves seated across from one another at a local cafe that neither of us had ever been to before. A little spot with a mishmash of cups and an excess of succulence. Little had changed with Jenna. She retained her knack for making you feel comfortable enough to breathe freely without feeling guilty. Her habit of wearing her hair in a carefree bun and her tendency to misuse sarcasm when she became anxious. Coffee was ordered, additionally pie, extra coffee please. The dam eventually failed. I spilled the beans to her. In regards to more than only the postponed vacation. However, it started me thinking about the years leading up to it, the emotional residue that had accumulated like dust in an unoccupied corner. Just as I had taught myself to be quiet, to not demand anything in return. For all that I offered, I had also prepared myself to ask for less. She paid close attention, the type of attentiveness that comes from someone who has been neglected herself. Then she made a statement that I still think about today. When we choose peace, we don't always realize it. Silence, though, is our choice. Silence, on the other hand, is really a form of submission, adorned with pretense. I needed to hear it badly. Weekend coffee, dates unplanned excursions to bookstores, and leisurely strolls around Forest Park were just a few ways that Jenna and I settled back into our usual routine during the following weeks. It was a friendship devoid of expectations, and for the first time in months, it felt secure. Ben, though, was a surprise. Ben was a hiking club buddy of Jenna's. We met at a community art night where her introduction was more of a coincidence than anything more. Volunteers were needed for an outdoor picture display that he was trying to organize. Immediately upon my hesitation, Jenna offered me a position. "Do you shoot digital or film?" he said the first time we met. I said, "Mostly digital. I am unable to attempt filming due of my commitment concerns." His laughter filled the air. To be honest, film, though, overlooks such inadequacies. With digital, you can't help but become fixated on them. That was nice. That night, we helped artists install their pieces and worked together to set up fairy lights. 2 hours into our meeting, he finally asked me what I did for a living. Unless I specifically asked, he avoided discussing himself. His voice had an unspoken calmness and consistency that I didn't know I needed until he spoke. He escorted me to my vehicle following the event. Eventually, he would like to view some of his photographs, he stated. My unexpected response was, "I'd like that." The romance was slow burning. It felt slower. Calm down. A coffee date ensued. The next stop is the Japanese garden for some photos. The next thing I knew, he had me signed up for a class on visual storytelling in urban settings. He remained silent. I could hear him clearly. I didn't feel pressured to conform to his expectations by him. He only created room. I also filled it out without any self-doubt, which is a rarity for me these days. I was careful not to spill the beans all at once. I did manage to offer a condensed version of The Trip That Never Was, but he made no effort to rectify the situation. He only nodded and remarked, "I'm glad you chose you," omitting the words, "but they're your family." No amount of begging for an apology from individuals who would never see me could compare to that. Jenna and I went on a weekend getaway to Astoria, which is only 2 hours away from the city. Not much going on, just a beach cabin, some delicious seafood, and an excessive amount of card games. While I was standing barefoot on the deck on the second morning, taking pictures of the rising sea mist, the realization hit me. Yes, please. It was the essence of existence. This was hardly the perfect life I had hoped to create in order to win my parents' approval. Not the one where I had some purpose before anyone noticed me. Totally my. Quite straightforward, honest, person selected. I snapped a picture of the dawn's gentle, limitless light. As it sliced across the sky, it remains unaltered. I skipped the filter. A moment ago, I preserved it. At times, it is necessary to have evidence of our presence, that we broke free from the molds that others had made for us. We revised the screenplay. The finale was more quieter than I had anticipated. My mother has not made any spectacular apologies, missing Claire's sincere message. Even Dad hasn't called to check in. No furniture, just empty room. Maybe at first, the absence of the item that once burdened you is the most visible sign of change, rather than fireworks or closure. Now that 3 months have passed since the trip that never was, I am not for the first time as an adult emotionally autopilot. What do they need from me today isn't the first thing that goes through my head when I wake up. This time I want to know, just what am I supposed to do? Honesty was never something I associated with rebellion when I was a kid. The idea that putting myself first meant leaving other people behind was drilled into my head at some point, although in a subtle and relentless way. Shrinkage, flexibility, and sacrifice were the hallmarks of that love. It was okay to not have limits if they were uncomfortable for other people. It was true to me until the day I decided otherwise. The temptation, the shame, and the need to see how they are doing still nag at me on occasion. Dissolving years of patterning takes time. However, I no longer act on such feelings. I just let them pass. It is what it is, the lingering effects of a part I am no longer considered for. Nobody in my family has been shut off. To keep them warm, I've merely stopped slitting myself. They could get me if they call. I will pay attention if they apologize. However, I will not grovel for recognition. I refuse to contort myself to fit into a mold that I have already surpassed. What I've realized and what I pray all those who have ever been the family glue realize is this: respecting boundaries is not egotistical. Recognizing that you require them is a sign of being human. Being the strong one conceals a pattern of people-pleasing and self-abandonment rather than a reward. If you want to know who someone is, you have to quit trying to make them feel comfortable with you. Your serenity is not something you should share. You cultivate it like a garden. Be careful with it. From the other side of a single terrible choice, sometimes lies the life we were destined to live, deciding on oneself, for reasons other than our anger. Nothing to do with seeking vengeance. That is, until now, when we are prepared to quit working for love and begin basking in its embrace. It doesn't matter if we have to love ourselves first. On that same trip to Astoria, I captured the sunrise, breaking through the fog right over the river in a photograph that I recently printed out. I had it framed and displayed over my desk, not because the composition was flawless. However, I will never forget what it captured. When I stopped trying to prolong the lives of other people, embarked on my personal journey,